you very much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this seminar. And thank you to the audience for being here this afternoon. So, well, the work I'm going to present is part of my research project, and it's an ongoing project. So I would like to present some of the, well, I say advances I have achieved since I'm working on these kind of questions, but I think it could be really helpful for me if you, well, say what you think about the ideas, or if you see some problems or something that can help me to clarify this kind of debate. So I would like to start introducing a more general framework. So my initial work started paying attention to the recent use some philosophers of biology and making of metaphysics in order to approach some biological problems, and in particular some conceptual biological problems. So there are different examples here. I just put some of them, but there are others in which you can see how in order to address a biological conceptual problem, some metaphysics is used in order to develop this work. So my initial focus was on paying attention to how these philosophers of biology use metaphysics when addressing these kind of problems. And it seems to me that there is not a unique way in which they are using metaphysics, but two different, well, forms of using metaphysics when applying it to biological conceptual problems. I have called these relations metaphysics for biology and metaphysics in biology. I will briefly explain them during the presentation, but I just want to know this is my framework. And in paying attention to these interactions between metaphysics and biology, I was curious by another kind of question that is more related to the debate in metaphysics of science as a discipline that is focused on studying the interaction or characterizing the interaction that exists between metaphysics and science. So my idea was to see whether the particular case of metaphysics of biology or the interaction that are taking place in metaphysics of biology can shed some light to the more general debate in metaphysics of science, and in particular to different kind of related questions, such as how can we characterize metaphysics, and how is the relation between metaphysics and science. And this is the project I'm currently working on now. So this is the outline of the talk. I will start introducing the general question about the metaphysics. How can we characterize metaphysics? At least the main characterizations of metaphysics that can be found in the literature. This is a metaphysical question. The reason for this strange word. Then I will present, well, metaphysics of science from the biological field, these ideas of the interaction, metaphysics for, metaphysics in biology, and maybe the contributions they can make to metaphysics of science. And finally, and this is the most interesting point for me today, is, well, if we can find, in fact, some lessons from the debate in metaphysics of science, paying attention to metaphysics of biology. And I have some proposal, such as talking about applied metaphysics or proposing an endosymbiotic relation between metaphysics and science. So let's start with the first point. So how is metaphysics possible? And in this sense, we need to accept this characterization of metaphysics as the study of the fundamental structure of nature, of reality, the structure and the nature of reality, as if metaphysics can go deeper than different special sciences. We are studying something that is, deeper in this sense. But if we characterize metaphysics in this sense, another question appears, that is the metaphysical question, that refers to the idea that, well, how can we acquire this kind of knowledge? How can we approach the study of the fundamental structure and nature of reality. How is metaphysics possible? Okay, this is the question that some authors, such as Thomas Tuchel, are asking in this sense. And this question is related to another debate that is taking place in the field of metaphysics of science that pays attention to how do metaphysics and science interact. They are related because, in fact, in exploring the interaction between metaphysics and science, the authors are presupposing and defining some way of understanding metaphysics. So this is the reason why, although they are different questions, they are very related in this sense. So the general debate is divided into two main positions. One of them considers the characterization of metaphysics as something that is performed a priori. It refers to this kind of a priori reasoning that takes place before considering the empirical discoveries or findings of science. And in this sense, when they explore the interaction between metaphysics and science, they consider that metaphysics is prior, the priority of metaphysics with respect to sciences. I will say more about this. And the other position reject the characterization of metaphysics as a priori reasoning and prefer a more scientific-based metaphysics, which is called naturalized metaphysics. And in this case, in the interaction between metaphysics and science, it is considered that the priority in this relation is of science. Science is prior to metaphysics in this sense. So let's see each of these positions. Concerning a priori metaphysics and the priority of metaphysics, some authors have considered that talking about a priori metaphysics, this idea of metaphysics as the a priori reasoning, it's talking about metaphysics simpliciter, in the sense that we don't need another way of characterizing metaphysics, because metaphysics is in fact this kind of procedure. And concerning the interactions, some authors have considered that metaphysics in this sense, the a priori metaphysics, is the condition for the possibility of science. This is the position defended by Stephen Mumford and Tugby, who consider that, well, metaphysics explore those concepts that are common to all sciences, such as kind, cause, law, and these concepts, in fact, are the ones that impose some kind of order in the world that is necessary in order to have scientific knowledge. It's like we need to presuppose that the world is ordered in some way in order to start doing science. And here is the definition they propose. Metaphysics of science as the metaphysical study of the aspects of reality, such as kindhood, lawhood, causal power, and causation, which impose order on the world and make our scientific disciplines possible. This is the idea. And there is another form of considering metaphysics and the relation with science in this characterization of metaphysics as a priori metaphysics, and it's considered, or it consists on saying that metaphysics is the science of the possible. It might sound strange, but it's a quite extended position, and I must confess that I really like this position. And it's the one proposed by Lowe and Tuchel, and it refers to the idea that, well, metaphysics has the resources to a priori establish the different possibilities about reality, and then it is science the one that finally decides or confirms which one of these possibilities is the one that actually is taking place in the world. So this is the idea. We read information about the metaphysically possible ways that the world might be with the help of a priori reasoning. This is the idea of metaphysics. We need to use a priori reasoning, which is ultimately grounded in essences, and the status of these results in terms of the actual world is determined by a posteriori scientific means. So in this sense, they consider that metaphysics and science are related but in the sense that metaphysics is prior. It's like the first step we need to take before performing science. According to these positions, we can defend the autonomy of metaphysics with respect to science. The subject matter, these authors claim, is different because metaphysics is the science of the possible, it's not the same as the scientific one. And concerning the methodology is also different because metaphysics uses the a priori reason. Yeah, the lowest one of these of the defenders of this idea. Okay? So as I was saying, in this case, the interaction is possible, and the kind of interaction is one such that metaphysics is prior to science. This characterization of metaphysics has been widely criticized. It has a lot of objections. Christian Soto, for instance, considered that, rejecting Manford and Tagby's consideration of metaphysics of science, it is not clear that the world is ordered. This is a metaphysical presupposition. So it's something that is not straightforwardly suggested by sciences and requires, by contrast, a good deal of speculation, which already finds its rationale in some form or another of metaphysics. It is not clear, he also says, that concepts such as causations, kinds, causal power are the ones that are common to all the sciences, whereas other concepts such as space and time are not common to all the sciences, but particularly are concepts that are particular of physics, which is something Manford and Tagby claims. And more general criticisms concerning a priori metaphysics are summarized by French and Mackenzie, who consider that, in summarizing the rejections to the a priori metaphysics, that this kind of metaphysics is frivolous. It's like it refers to mere possibilities, and in this sense, we can talk about stranger things such as world inhabited by zombies. It is really intuitive. There is metaphysicians use too much their intuitions in order to justify their hypothesis. And it is too domesticated because in a priori metaphysics, everything is interpreted, or they interpreted questions concerning contemporary physics as if they were talking about classical questions concerning fundamentality. So it is because of this kind of problems that a different alternative appears that is called naturalized metaphysics, and the main upholders of these positions are James Lediman and Don Ross. In this book, Everything Must Go, and they consider that, well, we cannot continue talking about a priori metaphysics if we want to defend that metaphysics is able to offer some kind of knowledge about the structure and the nature of reality. We need to accept that it needs to be integrated with science. Only if we consider that metaphysics is part of science, we can claim that metaphysics is able to perform the task it is supposed to do, to obtain this kind of knowledge. According to them, there is no room for an independent or a priori metaphysics. Metaphysics is done in continuity with science. I will explain what in continuity means. And metaphysics, of course, cannot be the science of the possible. It's like, however, we deny that a priori inquiry can reveal what is metaphysically possible. Philosophers have often regarded as impossible states of affairs that science has come to entertain. So we cannot say that, in fact, metaphysics is doing something similar to this idea. So how is the relation in this case, if we consider metaphysics as naturalized metaphysics, how does it relate to science? And in this case, we need to distinguish between two different characterizations of the idea of naturalized metaphysics, or the idea of how naturalized metaphysics makes some constraints on metaphysics. The weak version, which considers that we have some room, some space for metaphysics. And in this case, well, science is considered to be a guide of metaphysics. It's like, well, maybe metaphysics follows some of the constraints of science, but in this case, metaphysicians can debate about different topics and questions. And the last answer is always based on what science says. And one example, well, is Theodor Sider, who claims that, well, in metaphysics, we have different debates about the nature of time. Theories such as presentism, that is committed to the idea that only present is real, very generally, and eternalism, committed to the idea that no, past, present, and future are equally real. And according to Sider, well, we have a metaphysical debate, but finally, it is the special theory of relativity, the one that solves this kind of problem. Okay. So in this sense, science is only a guide to metaphysics. The problem is that this week's version finally ends up in a strong version in which metaphysics is motivated and restricted by our best current science. In this characterization, we have no room for this independent metaphysics that is working on different metaphysical questions. What we mean in this kind of cases is that metaphysics, in order to perform the activity that it needs to do, needs to follow the epistemological, methodological, and ontological, and this is important, constraints of science. That we don't have something different here, but science. If we want to obtain knowledge about the ontological status of the world, we need to follow what science is saying. So in this case, it's not clear that we have a real relation here between metaphysics and science. It seems that we only have science. Okay? This text is it's only developed by science. Naturalized metaphysics, in this sense, is the only one that can say something about the ontological structure of the world. This characterization of metaphysics has been questioned as well. Some authors, such as Sophie Allen and Anjan Chakrabarty, for instance, have considered that naturalized metaphysics is not, in fact, a form of metaphysics, precisely because it cannot do what it is supposed to do, that is to talk about the ontological structure of the world. Why? Well, according to Sophie Allen, this characterization shows that we couldn't be able to distinguish between different ontologies, two or more different ontologies, that might follow from a particular scientific theory. Why? Because if we only follow the scientific constraint, we don't have the resources to finally select one over the other. Okay? It's like we have different ontological implications that follow from the same scientific theory, and since we only have the scientific criteria, we cannot choose between this ontological diversity. According to Allen, it is only appealing to a priori metaphysics that we can develop the arguments that are necessary to choose between one ontology or another. Okay. Other kind of critics are focused on the idea that, well, naturalized metaphysics is not a kind of metaphysics because science already implies metaphysics. So naturalized metaphysics in this sense already have metaphysical assumptions and presuppositions. And to follow a quote of Ribeiro that I really like it, metaphysics is omnipresent in science. So it seems that we cannot avoid this, the appearance of metaphysical concepts. So this is the general framework in metaphysics of science. And now I'm going to present well, the particular case study of exploring the interaction or a particular interaction between metaphysics and a particular scientific discipline, such as biology. So this is the background I'm going to present. It is based on my previous work. in which I consider that there are two different forms of interaction, metaphysics for biology and metaphysics in biology. And it is important, I'm not going to focus on this idea during the presentation, but it's important to emphasize that this distinction in some cases is a question to focus, where the philosopher is paying more attention. In this sense, there are some cases that are clearly part of metaphysics for biology. There are another cases that are clearly part of metaphysics in biology, but there are also cases in which maybe both kinds of interaction are taking place at the same time, and it is not so clear to distinguish. So let's start with metaphysics for biology. In this kind of characterization, the philosopher of biology is paying attention to a particular biological concept that has some problems. For example, the characterization of fitness, the characterization of holobiont, the characterization of gene, okay, this kind of, or the characterization of a species, that is the classical biological conceptual problems. And in this case, in order to help clarifying the problem or to set some light in this solution, the philosopher uses some metaphysical theories and concepts that might be useful to clarify the ontological status of the entity to which the concept is referring, and in doing so, it helps to clarify the problem itself. Okay, this is the idea. So some cases I have presented the ones I have worked, but there are others. So some examples are the characterization of fitness, which is a classical debate in classic evolutionary biology and philosophy of biology. And well, some of the proposals have appealed to the causal dispositional account proposed in metaphysics in order to characterize fitness as a causal dispositional property. And the key is that in doing so, they are able to shed some light to this biological problem and also to contribute to the solution, or in the search for a solution to this problem. Or the characterization of holobionts, which is actual topic in philosophy of biology. How can we characterize holobionts? Are they individuals? Are they ecological communities? And in this case, it seems that the resource to the concept, the metaphysical concept of emergence, can also help to characterize the ontological status of the holobionts, understanding them as emergent individuals. And in this sense, they contribute to clarify and to solve this kind of philosophical problem, the problem concerning the biological concept. In metaphysics in biology, as I said, the focus is completely different. In this case, the philosopher of biology is paying more attention to a particular biological theory, such as Darwin's theory of evolution, for example, a particular biological practice, or a particular biological phenomenon. And he tries to explore or to make clear the kind of metaphysical presuppositions, assumptions, and implications that are already given in these different phenomena, theories, and practices. I don't know if I'm talking too fast. No. Okay, so in this case, as I said, the focus is a different one. Here, it is on these biological practice, theories, and phenomena. And well, I wanted to illustrate this idea with a case of biological practice because I thought it could be the most difficult one to see. And for instance, Thomas Radon have considered that if we pay attention to different practices taking place in different scientific disciplines, such as systematic biology and evolutionary biology, paying attention to these practices, we can see that biologists in the different fields are considering species in a completely different way, in a metaphysical sense. So according to Radon, in systematic biology, species refer to these phylogenetic lineages. The goal in this discipline is to classify living organisms. This is the kind of practice they are doing. And in this case, in order to classify, both present and past organisms are part of the species because they are part of this lineage. And hybrid organisms are included, regardless of whether they are fertile or not. In the case of evolutionary biology, Radon claims the focus, the practices of the biologists are different. They want to explain the mechanisms of evolution. And in this sense, they focus on the interactions taking place in the organisms, the present organisms given in the field, how they compete, how they fight, how they... I don't touch anything. Okay, thank you. How they reproduce. So in this case, it seems that only present organisms are considered. They don't consider past organisms because they cannot interact in this kind of mechanisms of evolution. Only fertile organisms are the relevant ones because they are the ones that can have offspring or contribute to having offspring. And in these kind of cases, when talking about species, sterile hybrids are not included, precisely because of this idea. They cannot make any contribution to the species. According to Radon, from these different biological practices, we can obtain some metaphysical or ontological conclusions about the species. According to him, in systematic biology, species are 4D entities. They are extended in space and time. And in evolutionary biology, species are ontologically 3D entities. They are extended in space, but they are not extended in time. Okay. So these are the two big frameworks I'm considering, and these are the distinctions. And now I go to the worst part for me, which the initial ideas I have in order to solve or address the problems I present in the introduction. So once we know that, or in paying attention to the different forms of metaphysics of biology, can we have some answer, or can we say something about the kind of metaphysics that is operating in the interaction, and also about the kind of relation that is taking place? So the idea is to see whether, paying attention to these biological cases, we have to conclude something more general about the interaction between metaphysics and science. And this is important because the initial studies concerning the interaction between metaphysics and science has been mainly focused on physics. And well, my idea was to see whether addressing the same questions from a different field can offer different, not solutions, but maybe perspective to the problems. So what kind of metaphysics is the one that operates in the relation? In metaphysics for biology, I'm questioning myself whether we can have a priori metaphysics. And it seems to me that the answer is clearly no. Because in addressing these conceptual biological problems, the metaphysician or the philosopher of biology that uses metaphysics is not establishing different possibilities about the ontology of the gene and then waiting for the biologist to see which of these ontologies is the possible one. In fact, this philosopher is really aware of the problems that biologists and philosophers of biology are facing concerning the role of the environment in fitness. For instance, I'm focused on the notion of fitness in this case. The role of the environment, the role of the particular traits, how they contribute to the overall fitness of the organisms, the role of the population, the role of development, how when you change the properties that, well, in developing are changing your fitness, or your fitness is affected by the new traits or the loss of some traits you already have. So in this case, a priori metaphysics does not seem to be really useful. I don't think this is the one we have in this case. Do we have naturalized metaphysics? In this case, I think that it is already clear that no, we don't have a case of naturalized metaphysics, because philosophers directly pays attention to metaphysical theories and metaphysical concepts. They don't obtain the metaphysical or the ontological conclusion just paying attention to the notion of yin or how it is used, but they use what is done in metaphysics in order to appeal these problems. And in this sense, I think we cannot properly talk about naturalized metaphysics in the sense the authors are considered naturalized metaphysics, following the constraints of science, or in this sense of biology. So what I'm thinking of is that maybe we have something different here. Maybe we have what Friends and Mackenzie call the metaphysical toolbox. That is, we need to acknowledge that metaphysicians might work on topics that might not be related to the clarification or the ontological world, in the sense that they are not talking with scientists. And this kind of metaphysicians exist. And they contribute to this metaphysical toolbox, developing theories, working on different concepts. And as I said, what the philosopher is doing is precisely to see what is done in this metaphysical toolbox and consider which resource is more accurate or is more useful for addressing a particular conceptual problem, in this case in biology. So it's like the philosopher is looking to both metaphysics and science, and he's considered which metaphysical elements are relevant for working on this. And this is the reason why I think that we have something in between the a priori and the naturalized metaphysics. I have called it applied metaphysics because of the application of the concept to the biological field, although I must confess that I'm not sure about the name of this kind of metaphysics. So this is my proposal in the case of metaphysics for biology. But what about metaphysics in biology? Well, in this case, I think that it is clear that we don't have a priori metaphysics. Again, well, and in this case, it is very well illustrated because the philosopher is directly focusing on biological practices, biological theories, biological phenomena. So in this case, he's not speculating or by means of a priori reasoning. Do we have naturalized metaphysics in this way? And this question is problematic because some of the philosophers that are already doing metaphysics of biology claim precisely that they are using naturalized metaphysics. Dupré and Nicholson are a good illustration of this idea. We claim, well, metaphysics is generally to be established through empirical means and is ultimately, therefore, answerable to epistemology. So the idea when talking about metaphysics is naturalized metaphysics or scientific metaphysics. Yet, I don't think they are doing naturalized metaphysics because I think that they are doing something that is richer than naturalized metaphysics allows to do. So in this case, well, if they claim that they are doing naturalized metaphysics, they will have this kind of problems. How it is possible to, or it is possible for you to talk about metaphysical assumptions, presuppositions, and implications of the biological sciences you are considering? And how do you talk about the metaphysical aspects that are already given in the biological theories? And also, how are you able to distinguish between or in cases of ontological pluralism. And in the case of Nicholson and Dupré, this kind of problem will appear to them because they are paying attention, or in some of their studies, they are focusing on some of the features of biological organisms and the living beings in order to claim that, well, with what we have here, the living organism is not a substance, but they are processes. That is, the ontological implications that we obtain when paying attention to the living beings and the organisms is that they are processes. Well, my question is, how do you know that they are processes if you are not already taking into account a notion of what a process is? This idea of processes are not directly obtained from the observation or the study of the implications of the living beings. You need to presuppose something about substances and something about processes in order to claim that they are processes, in order to select one theory over the other. And this is a quotation of Dupré and Nicholson in which they explain this. So, what is the difference between a thing or a substance and a process? A starting point is the following. Processes are extended in time, they have temporal parts. Well, in fact, temporal parts are really controversial notion in metaphysics, but they are using them. Whether things have temporal parts is a debate. We shall not say any more about this debate here. Except to know that four-dimensionalism, that is another metaphysical theory, is already halfway towards a full-blown process ontology. So what I say is that if they want to do this, they are using something different that is not naturalized metaphysics. And my idea is that they use naturalized metaphysics, or the term naturalized metaphysics or scientific metaphysics, in order to avoid a characterization of them in terms of a priori metaphysics. It's like, if we only have these two options, I'm not doing this one, I'm doing the other one. But as I said, I don't think it's naturalized metaphysics precisely because we need to already have something in mind concerning substances, processes, properties, when talking about the ontological implications and presuppositions on theories, phenomena, and practices. So again, I think that what we have here is a case of something in between that I call applied metaphysics. And in this case, although the focus is here, this kind of resources, this kind of metaphysical resources are already part of the background of the philosopher in order to study this kind of problems and trying to understand them. So this is something that cannot be captured, I think, with the terms a priori or naturalized metaphysics. I think that something else is needed. This is concerning the characterization of metaphysics. But what about the relation between metaphysics and science, or about metaphysics of biology? Can we talk about the priority of metaphysics or the priority of science? And I think that concerning the particular case of exploring the ontological, or when we want to talk about the structure of the world, neither of them is the prior one in this relation. Instead, it seems that it is a question of focus. Again, we maybe are, or we can focus on epistemological or methodological aspects of the theory. Maybe we are more focused on the metaphysical tools in order to set lines of on a particular conceptual biological problem, or maybe we are more interested on exploring the metaphysical assumptions of a particular theory. But it is not always a case in which one prevails or is prior over the other. Furthermore, we have this idea that science is metaphysically unavoidable. It's like, it seems to be a problem, according to some authors, to try to make metaphysics scientific when metaphysics is already implied in some scientific theories. So, in this particular case, the relation is not one of priority. It seems that the relation is closer than it seems, and that the relation of priority can illustrate. And in this sense, some authors, such as Jonathan Lowe, have talked about symbiosis. They have considered that the relation between metaphysics and science is a symbiotic relationship in which each complements the other. It's this idea to illustrate that we don't have the case in which one is prior or is over the other, but both are at the same level, and in fact, both are interacting in a symbiotic way. I think that this idea of appealing to symbiosis is a good one because it put both disciplines at the same level. But I think that maybe the relation is a little bit stronger in this case. So I was thinking of something like, well, this is just to illustrate that in this case, symbiosis is good, as I said, to defend the autonomy of the disciplines and to illustrate the closer complementary relation between them. But for me, maybe we need something stronger. Why? Because although symbiosis can talk about or allow us to talk about the autonomy of both disciplines or this complementary relation, we need also to explain that in scientific theories, we already have metaphysics, metaphysical assumptions, metaphysical presuppositions, and maybe metaphysics and science are endosymbiotically related. They are more integrated than in a mere symbiotic relation. Metaphysics is also part of science. Well, here I wanted to illustrate that this is science, metaphysics, and these are the different special sciences because I don't want it to illustrate science as such. And in this case, I think that considering an endosymbiotic relation, we can solve some of the problems that are continuously present in metaphysics when characterizing metaphysics. For instance, this idea that we have a bootstrapping relationship between the a priori and the a posteriori, because it seems that when doing metaphysics, we have some a priori concepts, but in some way, we also need some previous a posteriori concepts. So this idea that both a priori and a posteriori elements are intertwined can be better captured if this relation between metaphysics and science is closer than the symbiotic relation illustrated. Also, it serves to explain the different cases of focus. Maybe in some cases we are interested in the metaphysical aspects, maybe in other cases we are interested in the epistemological ones. Why is this possible? Because in endosymbiosis, we still maintain the autonomy of the both disciplines. They don't disappear, so we can select in which one we want to focus in each particular case. And also, I think that the case of endosymbiosis illustrate or is able to explain something that is important when talking about the relation between metaphysics and science, and they are cases of cross-fertilization. Cross-fertilization because metaphysics, as we have seen, can help to clarify some conceptual biological problems or can help to shed some light to these kind of problems. But also because science can shed some light to metaphysical debate. In this sense, we can capture this idea that science in some way is a guide to metaphysics. So in this case, Thomas Raydon, for instance, considered that we have considered that in the different biological disciplines, species are ontologically characterized as different, 3D in the case of evolutionary biology and 4D in the case of systematic biology. We can develop arguments to illustrate that the debate in metaphysics concerning the equivalence between 3D and 4D is not, have a solution. That is, the solution is that they are not equivalent. Because in the biological case, it is not possible to show the equivalence between biological species in the systematic way and biological species in the evolutionary biology way. So this is a form to illustrate that, well, science can also contribute to solve or to shed light to some metaphysical debates. And also, the application of some metaphysical theories or concepts to the biological field or the particular scientific field we are considering can also improve the metaphysical resources themselves. In this particular case, when addressing the characterization of fitness as a causal disposition, we realize that although Manford and Anjun in the dispositional theory of causation propose that we have disposition that dispose towards a particular goal and away a particular goal, in the case of, in a biological case, we need disposition that dispose both towards and away, such as sexual traits, which can dispose towards reproduction in some cases and against survival. So this is a way to improve a metaphysical theory, considering that well, maybe we need to recognize this kind of cases. So to conclude, I think that, well, metaphysics of biology, in fact, can shed some light to the debate in metaphysics. I think that we need something else besides or in the middle of a priori and naturalized metaphysics. And the relation between metaphysics and science is closer than presented in the characterization of the prevalence or the priority of metaphysics over science or the priority of science over metaphysics, because both disciplines are needed when characterizing the ontological status of the world. And also that I consider that maybe one way of understanding this kind of interaction is by considering them as an endosymbiotic relation, because we can maintain the autonomy of both disciplines, we can explain cases of focus, and also we can explain cases of cross-fertilization. So this is all. Thank you very much for your attention.